welcome. My name's Richard Feidler. I do host this program she spoke of, and both my guests today have been guests on that program because the litmus test we often use for it is people who have seen and done extraordinary, amazing things, and these two people certainly qualify, not in the sense that either of them have colonised the moon or built an Antarctic base, but done extraordinary things within the confines of what life had to offer them. For a large part of your life, Jonty, you were the CEO of the Queensland Homicide Victims Support Group. You were really young in that role as well. What was the primary role of that group, and what kind of support can you offer people who've just experienced the most catastrophic loss and shock in their lives?
Well, first of all, I'd like to think I still am really young, just to cut you there.
Like were you 9 or something when you took over that job, is what I mean.
Yeah, look, the experience that I had with that organisation was amazing. I used to kind of say, I guess you see the best and the worst of humanity, probably quite similar to the policing kind of role. You're coming into somebody's life at the worst time in their life, which is quite surreal really, to be watching humans functioning at a very raw survival level, having just heard the worst news that they could ever be given. But then, and I guess people used to say, how do you do that? How do you kind of stay in that role and kind of look forward to going to work, because it must be a really depressing place to work. But I guess I used to see the other side of it with people that were very committed to I guess getting better, getting well, and really it was quite a cathartic time for people looking at their life generally. Often we hear about this transformation or transformative kind of traumatic growth, and we would see that a lot in that organisation where this traumatic experience had happened, but people would completely review their lives and go on to do quite astonishing things. Yeah,
I mean, like death by misadventure, having lost a loved one through death by ordinary causes is one thing, but death by homicide is something else. It's a whole other realm. There's normally a kind of degree of hatred and malice that's within that. How quickly is it wise to approach someone who's just suffered that loss under those circumstances?
Oh, look, that's always a tricky question when it comes to grief. I think people are always very frightened about how to respond or how not to respond. I know, I guess in my case, when I went through it, I personally felt like a bit of a leper, really. I think the thing about homicide particularly that you don't get in a lot of other griefs is that it is quite public. The media latches onto it and it becomes everybody's story and everybody's journey. I can remember people stopping me shopping to ask about how the case was going, just random strangers, and just that astonishing thought that people would have the audacity and the care, I guess, in some ways, to do that. It's a blessing and a curse as well. In some ways you want the community reaction, you want people to care and you want them to respond, and that actually makes you feel like you're not alone in your grief. But the other side is quite traumatic. So I guess my advice would be, if you're working with someone or dealing with someone that's gone through that time, is really to acknowledge it. And sometimes it's
How?
Sometimes I guess it depends on the relationship you've got with that person. But I would think just being respectful, just keeping an eye on them, acknowledging, I'm sorry I've heard about your loss. I'm so sorry if there's anything we can do. Let me know. It can really be as simple as, it sounds very simple, but it really just is that.
That's actually a really useful form of words though, because I don't know what to say under those circumstances to someone. So just the simple acknowledgement of it, I'm sorry for your loss.
That's it. I mean, I had people saying to me, I think with homicide too, and I'm trying to generalise it for grief generally, but with homicide it's quite unique. People would come up and ask me if my sister had been involved in drug activity or gang activity, because we like to think if something's gone, when a homicide happens, we like to think there's a reason for it. We like to think good people aren't murdered. So we're trying to look for the underlying reason why this person has been selected to be killed. We want there to be a story.
The story of your sister's extraordinary. Well, I'll come to that in a moment. So, Heath, how about you? You're the CEO of Youth in Search. Talk a bit about what they do, what Youth in Search does as an organisation for young people.
We run these weekend workshops where young people can come together and discuss the issues that are going on in their lives.
What kind of young people typically do you invite along to these things?
Young people have experienced some sort of emotional trauma, so they might have experienced family breakdown, death of a parent, sexual abuse, drug and alcohol abuse, or grief of some sort. A friend might have committed suicide, or a young person might have died in the community, and we help step them through that experience. And I think Jonty touched on something very important just a minute ago, and that is that it's often the simple things that are the most effective. People are often going out to find the big solutions or the complicated solutions to things. Whereas what I've found in my experience with myself and with young people is if you just give them love, a hug, companionship, an ear to listen to, and time, that's the thing that's going to help them through it. Not coming up with these big solutions, these complicated technical answers or anything like that. Just that caring of another person is the most important thing I think you can offer, not just to young people, but anybody.
I suppose the first thing we want to do is to fix things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't fix something that's...
No, and sometimes it's not immediately necessary to fix things. Sometimes they've got to have time to just sit with the emotions and the feelings and accept what's happened.
You have to let things heal rather than... So we're not machines that can be fixed, are we?
That's right.
We're creatures that heal, aren't we?
It's an experience, life is an experience, and so is the experience of pain.
And how do you do that through Youth in Search? How do you then offer that kind of healing process for people who've suffered some kind of trauma?
Well, we bring those simple things right directly to them. So we take them through, we teach them how to hug. A lot of them haven't experienced hugs before in their life. So we actually teach them how to do that in a very safe, trusting environment. We provide them with the opportunity just to discuss with other young people the issues that are going on. So they have a time to express it and to draw on each other's experiences and learn from each other. And we mentor them as well. So we give them that support that they need to take control of their own lives, to empower their own lives.
You're both doing this because of extraordinary life circumstances. And Jonty, it begins with you. Some years ago, 2000, you were sharing a house with your sister Jacinta and her child and her partner at the time. And your sister Jacinta was murdered by that partner in what was described as a frenzied attack. How were you told that she'd been killed?
Well, that was quite interesting, actually. I received a phone call from my father. I was staying at a friend's house that night. And all he said on the phone was, you need to come home, Jacinta's been in an accident. So I drove to the house and remember opening the door. It's funny the things that you remember so vividly, and then I can't remember what I wore yesterday, but opening the door to the house and watching him approach me with his arms open and tears in his eyes. And you've got to understand we weren't a very huggy family, so I knew that I don't actually remember how he told me. What I remember, funnily enough, was screaming, this is the name of the offender. This is Chris, his name was. This is Chris, Chris has done this. So at some kind of level, even though I hadn't seen any violence from him prior to this, it's just interesting that was my immediate reaction.
How quickly did the national media start to get in your face about all this?
Immediately. I think it felt like within minutes of being told at the house, the media was on the front lawn. Before the police were even there to pick us up to ID her body, the media were there. And they really stuck with us the whole way through, which, like I say, was a blessing and a curse. In one way, it was a terrible curse. We had the original trial that went through for my dad's case was a mistrial because of the media's influence and misreporting. So the media can be quite damaging in these cases. In other ways, the media can be highly effective, particularly in cold cases, for example.
What was the court process like where the man who killed your sister was tried and then...
Look, that process, I could talk all day about the court process. My sister's trial was actually reasonably straightforward, as much as you don't want to be participating in any kind of court process like that, and for that reason, he pled guilty. And so in Queensland we have mandatory life sentencing for murder, which is a minimum parole period of 15 years. So he's actually up for parole in 2015, which will be interesting. I've just started exploring with corrective services around justice, victim offender mediation actually, and contemplating whether I want to go and mediate with him prior to his release. But his was a fairly straightforward trial. He just pled, went straight to court, straight to prison from there. It was my dad's case that was the traumatic one.
That's right. That's where things get a lot more complicated. Your father was then assaulted in an argument over the custody over Jacinta's baby. He was punched in the head twice and then died from his injuries. I just can't imagine the kind of rage that must have. So to have lost your sister.
I mean, it was astounding. When we lost Jacinta, she was 19 years old. She was a single mum. I was 21. Nothing like this had ever happened in our life. We had never had any issue around traumatic death or violence or anything. So for this to happen in the first place was amazing. What then happened was a bit of a custody battle over her child, and some 4 months after Jacinta died, Dad was assaulted, as you say, punched twice in the head, and died as a result of that. So we lost 2 people within 4 months through 2 random acts of violence, which that's why I say I felt like a leper. You know, how can this happen to one family? So I've forgotten your question.
No, it's all right.
Just to try to qualify it for the people that don't know, just the timeline of it was so astounding. And both losses were very different. In my sister's case, I remember feeling obviously stunned and shocked and full of rage, but also I remember feeling this really clear sense of, oh my God, she's given me this incredible gift of seeing how short life is. I've got to get out there and see the world and do everything I can. And then when Dad died, it was very different. I just felt like my heart had been ripped out. Our mother wasn't on the scene, so that meant I would now have to care for my 13-year-old brother. So life changed dramatically after Dad's death. Very different. There
was a period of profound depression, wasn't there?
Absolutely, yeah. More so after the acquittal.
After the acquittal,
yeah,
yes, because the man who hit your father, assaulted your father, was tried for manslaughter and then was acquitted.
That's correct, yep. So we went to court and the judge called upon the excuse of accident, which in Queensland is around foreseeability. So in Queensland, the law is, if it's not and in many states, if it's not foreseeable or death wasn't a foreseeable outcome of the 2 punches in this case, then you must acquit. So the jury came back and acquitted on both manslaughter and grievous bodily harm. We asked the police if we could look at an assault charge, at least, just trying to look for anything we could. We were told my dad would need to be alive to testify he didn't want to be struck to have an assault charge stick. And so that was the depressing moment when every other thing goes. At least after Dad's death, I thought, we know who did it. He's not arguing what he did. So I had something to hold on to, but after the acquittal, where do you go from there?
Well, I have to ask the question, why aren't you a mess? Why aren't you...
I have been.
Yeah, I know. Of course you were for a while, but why aren't you... What got you out of that?
I guess lots of little things. Having my brother, having something else to focus on. I had a 13-year-old that was now really dependent on me, and he was it's funny how sometimes the worst thing, what you think is the worst thing at the time actually comes out to be the best thing in your life. And at the time I kind of resented this situation I was in, having to look after him, but it was the best thing because it got me out of my own depression. I think also, having having my niece around, she was still part of our life, and the difficulty with that tension is obviously the perpetrator in my dad's case was a family member of my niece's, so that was the extra difficult thing. But I think that's been one of the best things, because it's forced me to have to relate to the perpetrator's family and to have to sort through those issues of rage and anger. So I guess those things, and really just wanting, someone said to me a long time ago, tell me to stop talking because I can talk. But someone said to me very early on, be my reason, not my excuse. And that really struck with me. That.
What do you mean?
As in, be my reason to keep going and to have a wonderful life. These deaths have happened, but that becomes the reason to live every moment like it's your last. I know that's a cliche, but truly that is what you are reminding yourself going through these journeys, rather than be my excuse to just give up. Giving up, I just think that would have been too easy.
I'm skipping over a whole lot of parts of your career here, but you CEO of the Queensland Homicide Victim Support Group, starting the One Punch Can Kill campaign, being named Young Australian of the Year for 2009. In that process, I know one of the lovely things about that, having some association with the Australia Day Committee, is you travel all over Australia and you meet really lovely people.
Yeah.
Is that kind of refreshing always from going and living in a world where you're surrounded by very intimate knowledge of violence, death, people perpetrating all sorts of dreadful things, to meet a whole lot of lovely people for a year?
It was the best experience of my life, and that's obviously such an understatement, but you're right, having that. Look, the Young Australian thing was really interesting because people would say, oh, you're proud of what you've done, and I used to think, well, it's really difficult because if I wanted to be an author and I wanted to write the most amazing book in the world, and I wrote the book and went out and published it, and then I won an award because of this amazing book, you'd go, yay, I put my mind to something and now I've achieved it and I've been recognised, and that is something to be proud of. But I guess it's difficult when you feel like what you're receiving something for. I don't know, it's difficult to reflect on yourself. I just saw that I made some very good decisions along the way. I don't see that as being extraordinary. I see that as being survival, perhaps. I don't know, maybe I'm looking at it differently. But it was amazing to be interacting with people that you admire and then thinking, oh my God, they admire me back. That's very surreal.
That is lovely, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's also cool you got on the front page of the White Pages, the Brisbane White Pages, and I pointed to my kids and said, oh, that's a friend of mine. He went, you know that woman on the White Pages? Yeah, I got a radio show, Yeah, but she's on the White Pages. There she is. That's kind of amazing, I think.
Yeah.
Heath, you wrote this lovely, lovely book which I read a couple of years ago when you came on my program called Room at the Top. Tell me what Room at the Top means for you.
I guess that's, for me personally, it means the end of the journey through all that trouble that I experienced when I was a young boy, and overcoming that despite the odds, to become a lawyer and do all those other things. So I guess obtaining that room up the top of society, despite all the challenges.
It's a real place too, though, wasn't it, for you as a kid? The room at the top. It was a place where you'd go and
yes, that's right.
Escape,
well,
wasn't it?
Yeah, the double meaning. Yes. So the other meaning was that as a young boy, because I lived in a very a household with a lot of kids. I'm one of 10, so there was no place to study. And there was always a lot of activity in the house, fights, people coming through to buy drugs off my brother. So what I used to do to escape that, I made up my mind some years ago on a youth in search camp that I wanted to do something with life and be successful. And I realised that to do that, I'd have to go to university. There's no place for me to study in my house, so what I used to do is climb up the mulberry tree, which is at the front of our house and hung over the roof. Climbed up that tree to the roof, and I studied up there, and that's how I got all my study done to get into uni and do everything else. That's the other meaning to it.
Tell me about, describe the process for you of getting ready for school when you were a kid in that house.
Oh, we really just grabbed whatever clothes were on the floor and prepared. Mum, she was a single parent. We didn't have a father around, and with all those kids around, she's really caved under the amount of housework was there, and really didn't have the capacity to look after us very well. So there often wasn't enough clean clothes or matching socks and things like that, and we were really left to our own devices to grab what was there and get off to school. So I'd often go to school with dirty clothes or ripped clothes and those sorts of things, and obviously that had a big impact on me at school.
What did you eat a lot of the time?
Mostly cereal for breakfast, cereal for dinner. Sometimes Mum would be able to pack lunch, but often she wouldn't also, so the teachers would have to provide lunch to myself and the rest of my brothers and sisters.
Were you made painfully aware of how different your family situation was from other kids at school?
Yeah, so I lived in a housing commission home in an area that was actually relatively well-to-do, and we went to school with kids from those backgrounds, so we really stood out, and we were known famously or infamously as the Ducker kids, and I guess because we came from that background, we were immediately looked down upon.
Kids are really cruel in those situations, aren't they? The poor family in the school, they can be I remember recall in my school, they can be brutal like that.
Absolutely. And look, the teachers, I think, cared, but also there was this underlying sort of belief that, well, you won't amount to very much, and it's not so much what they said, but how they treated us. So there's already this misconception, just because you come from that background, you're not really going to achieve anything.
You met a lot of, fortunately though, you had these wonderful people that sort of came into your life that helped you enormously. And a guy called Philip Crawford, tell me about him and how he was able to help you.
He was a children's worker who got involved in our life, and he was just one of those people who, like I spoke about before, just really genuinely cared and wanted to make a difference. And as a young person, I really felt for that. I really clicked to that. It made a big difference, just having that person who believed in me, and he got me involved in Youth in Search later on, and which had a tremendous impact on my life.
So going to Youth in Search then helped you kind of dissociate yourself. It convinced you the need to step away from your family or find some space on your own to not let it...
Sure, but it also taught me that, it's not the circumstances that I come from or that I live in that are going to dictate my future. It's myself. It's my own attitude. It's what I think here and what I feel in here that makes a difference. And that I learned that I have control over my attitude, and I learned to turn my disadvantage into my advantage. So rather than look at them as something that's going to hold me back and be a burden for the rest of my life, I learned that I could learn from them, and that they could inspire me to reach higher heights and to go on and be successful.
Was it your first Youth in Search camp you went to in the Blue Mountains? That was so pivotal in your life. I remember you telling me about this when you were on the program. You kind of made it's not often that people have those moments in their lives. I'm not sure if I believe in them in the majority of cases,
yes.
but this is really true, literally true in your case. This weekend is absolutely pivotal in your life, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me was that I saw other young people who had experienced what I experienced, and I realised that I wasn't the only one in the situation. I think when you're trapped in those sort of traumatic experiences, you often think that you're alone and that no one in the world understands or no one in the world has experienced the same thing. At that camp that weekend, I realised that wasn't true, and that lifted such a burden off my shoulders. And I think that was really the turning point.
Yes, there was, I think you mentioned there were kids being asked there if any of them had experienced sexual abuse, and you had when at the hands of the father of a friend of yours.
Yes.
Did you feel you could own up to it then, Heath? Was it hard to own up to the fact that you'd been abused at that point?
I guess until I went to that program, I had not really accepted that it had happened and tried to push it down into my memory. Of course, I'd think about it from time to time and have nightmares about it, so it was obviously still there, but I just ignored it and pushed it away. Youth in Search provided me with the courage to face it, and I guess with the realisation that if I've experienced it, it's okay. Other people have experienced it, and you will get through it, and it's nothing to be ashamed of, i.e. it's not my fault. And that made a big difference.
Did you think it was your fault? That's very common for kids. That just kills me to think that kids somehow, they take on so much feelings of responsibility, don't they? Did you do that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I guess it's just that fact of being young and not understanding what happened, not understanding the experience. So you start to think, well, did I bring that onto myself? Did I put myself in the wrong position, in the wrong situation? And you don't realise as a 12, 13-year-old kid that obviously you can't have, it's not you who decided to do that, to take that action against you. It's the person, it's the perpetrator who did that. You
went on to do a law degree. Worked for the Attorney General of New South Wales as a senior advisor, and you even met John Howard. How did your meeting with John Howard go when he was Prime Minister?
Well, the funny story, I told him that I wanted his seat in 10 years' time, and he laughed. He said, "Oh, I'll keep it warm for you, Heath."
Did you tell him which party you might be running for for that seat? You guys are often upheld as inspirational figures, and you clearly are. There's no doubt about that. You're extraordinary people, both of you. Do people keep wanting to put you in this mould of saint, though? Do they keep... they freak out if you tell a dirty joke, for example? Are you not allowed to tell dirty jokes or make smart-ass remarks, that kind of thing? Is that an issue, Heath?
Yeah, I think a lot of people look up to us, so we're quite sensitive about those sins, but we're far from perfect. Certainly still, Jonty might be a bit more perfect than that. But I know, yes, that can be difficult. It can be quite a burden to carry, but I think the most important thing is to be yourself and to not get caught up in that, and that's sort of what I try to do.
Yeah, for you it seems to be like, don't let circumstances or people who might not wish the best for you drag you down too much, to not...
Yeah, that's right. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess the sad thing about the world is there are lots of people who will want to pull you down and who don't believe that that's possible or this is possible or whatever. And you've got to surround yourself by the people who do. And you've got to make a conscious choice to do that, I think.
Does that ring a bell with you, Jonty?
Yeah, absolutely. I read a really lovely quote. I'm big on other people's quotes, so I've got to start coming up with some of my own, but I read a really good quote.
I'm perfect's not a bad start, I think. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Now I've forgotten my quote.
What was your quote?
It was something like, don't let someone who gave up on their dreams talk you out of yours. And I really identified with that, because often the people that are the naysayers, the last person you should be listening to. It's the people that believe in you and tell you yes. But ironically, often I find, particularly as you are younger, I found as I've gotten older, I'm able to work out quite quickly where people's agendas are, and often they can be threatened, or that they didn't achieve their dreams, and so they are quite critical of your pursuits. But yeah, if I had have really taken to heart advice or criticisms that people had have told me early in my career, I wouldn't have done half the things I achieved.
It's been lovely to bask in the reflected glow of both of you this morning. Thank you. Please thank Jonty and Heath, please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.